Hi there. In this Adobe Creative Cloud video, we'll look at Photoshop and how to create masks with the gradient tool. So basically you can have nice gradual blends between your images from opaque to transparent. So I'm working towards this thing here. So it's made up of these three images, and I've softened their edges to make them blend nicely together. In addition, I'll be adding a texture and some text, and I'll be messing with something called blending modes. So I've got Photoshop open here. I'm going to quickly create a new document, 640 by 480. So I can use either photo or print, whatever you like to use. I'll go ahead and use photo, and I'll use 640 pixels is what I'm saying. By 480 pixels, and I'll use 100 pixels per inch. I might have to go back and do some of that stuff. 100 pixels. 640, 480, 100 pixels per inch. So I choose create. Gives me a new blank canvas. I've got my crop tool left over from before, so if I choose another tool, it'll go away. And I'll open up my file browser and just drag those three images onto my canvas. So when you place images in this manner from a file browser, it'll ask you if you want to apply any dimensions. So I'm just going to keep these all at their stock dimension. So in the options bar, we get the transform controls. I'm just going to leave them stock at their native dimensions, you could say, and I'll choose check. Next one, check. Next one, check. So they all come into the document, they all get their own layers, and they pick up the file name for the layers. So if you're careful about what you name your files, then you don't have to worry about naming your layers. The first thing I'm going to do is quickly remove all of the color from these images so they don't clash, and then I'll apply a color via blending mode later on. So with my students layer selected, I'll choose image and adjustments and hue saturation, and I'll just remove the saturation. And OK. That adds an adjustment layer. I'll need to apply this before I can soften the edges with a mask. So right now this is a smart object. I need to flatten it basically, or render it to do any further work with it via some tools. So I'm just going to Alt drag that hue saturation to the other two layers. So I'm holding down Alt on my computer and dragging the word hue saturation directly onto the layer. I let go. And now that's black and white as well. I'm going to do the same thing. Alt drag hue saturation to the computer. So now you'll see that all three of those images are black and white. So next thing I'm going to do is quickly render all of these layers. Without rendering, I won't be able to add the masks. So we choose layer, rasterize, and then all layers. So that basically prints the adjustment that I performed via the image to the actual image. And now I'm going to quickly add my masks. So basically my goal here is to soften the edges of these images. I'll start with this one since it's in the front, so that's the students layer. And I add a mask to do that. The way masks work is you draw with white or black, or paint with white and black. White is opaque, black is transparent. So if you use the gradient tool, where you start your drag, if I'm using foreground to background, will be opaque. In this case it'll be transparent and then opaque. Or I can switch them to reverse, and then where I start will be opaque and then transparent. So I'm going to quickly choose my gradient tool, and for my preset I'll use basics, and foreground to background. And then I'm just going to apply that by clicking on the options bar, and I'll swap that to be white and black. So where I start my drag will be opaque, where I let go of the mouse will be transparent. So I'm going to soften this corner here. So I'm going to start, generally what you want to do is start your drag at the point that you want to keep. You let go of the mouse at the point that you want to remove. So I want to remove this corner, so I'm just going to drag before that corner, and it softens that corner. So where I let go of my mouse is 100% transparent. That is black. I need to apply that mask so I can soften other edges. So if I just right click directly on the mask, I apply layer mask, and then I can add a new one, and I'll soften this edge. You can hold down Shift on your keyboard to get a perfectly straight line if you like. And I'll apply and mask and apply and mask and apply and mask. Also, if you keep your drags nice and long, that'll be a more gradual change from opaque to transparent. So if the drag is short, then you'll have a more abrupt change from opaque to transparent. I'm going to add one more for that top edge. I don't want that hard edge there. I'll start in the middle of his head this time. So that one will be a bit more abrupt, but at least we don't see that hard line. I still wanted to see the detail in his face and his hair. And I'll apply, and I'll drag my computer above my eye so I can see the computer as well. I'm just going to move these students to the top left corner. Something like that. And I'll move the computer bottom left. Something like that. And I'll quickly add masks to the computer layer and the gradient tool, and do the same thing. Again, starting the drag at the point you want to keep. You can consider that at the point you want to keep detail in your image as well, not just it visible. And then letting go of the mouse just before the point that you want to definitely remove. And I'll do the bottom as well. Perfect. So I'm happy with those computers. I'm going to do the same thing with this eyeball, but this time I'm going to use a radial shape for my gradient. So I'm going to pick up this one here. And I'll start in the center. I'm going to just drag a little bit past the edge of the image. Because this isn't a perfectly round circle, I want to still keep the detail in the corner of the eye there. It's just this corner that I'm concerned with, so I'm just going to drag that past there. So I'm going to choose my eye layer, add my mask, and looks good. So I'm going to, I don't need to print this one. However, I do have this little piece of text that I want to get rid of, so I'm just going to quickly apply that and add one more mask. This one will be the plain old linear gradient, and I'm just going to drag just before that point, but I do want to keep this detail here, so I'm going to keep my drag short. There we go, beautiful. And apply. So to add color to this, I'm going to add a new layer. I'm going to call it color. I'm going to fill it with color. Put it at the topmost layer. I'll fill it with color. So I'm going to use the paint bucket tool, and I'll choose my foreground color. I'll make it blue. There's a nice dusty blue there that I like. 03366 is the hex code, and I choose OK and fill it with color. And then these are the blending modes here. So by default it's just opaque, and it of course obscures everything. All of the pixels are blue, they're not transparent at all, but if you use a different blending mode, it'll interact with the layers below. You can get a preview by mousing over, so you can find one you like. I want the background to be blue. I'm imagining that I'm putting this on a layout that has a blue background, so I'm going to use that one. But you could choose one that you like. Oh, that one's pretty good too. That linear lights, I think I'm going to go with hard light. There we go. And now if you want to add a texture to this, I'm going to quickly add a shape above my background layer. So I'm going to choose my background layer. I'm going to click on my rectangle tool, choose that. I'm just going to arbitrarily draw a rectangle. And then I'm going to make it 640 by 480, the same size as the image. Same size as the canvas, I should say, 480. And I'm going to line it. Since they're both the same size, you can use any of these, but I'll just go with center. Line to canvas. And it's filled with blue. It's on the lowest layer though. If you want a texture, you can double click right on the thumbnail or the actual layer. No, you have to choose effects, and I'm going to choose I'm going to use bevel and emboss to add a texture. So the texture, we have a couple of stock textures in here. I'm just going to use grass. You can download and install textures as well. So that gives us a texture in the under, kind of below it. I choose OK. Now, if I want to mask that texture, so I don't want this texture to be on the images, I just want it to be on the edges of the image. Or you may go the opposite. You may want to just the texture to fade away, which is a common thing when you're making something distressed. But again, I want the center to be free of texture, and then the edges to have a texture. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly rasterize that. And then I'm going to add a mask to that as well. So again, I'll use my gradient tool, and I'll use the radial one, but this time I'm going to swap the colors. So where I start my drag will be transparent, when I let go of the mouse will be opaque. So I think maybe just we'll see what happens. Looks pretty good. You might want to make your drag a little bit shorter so you get, or a little further if you want less of the texture. So if I go a little further, then I'll have less of the texture. That's pretty good. So I'm going past the edge of the canvas. You can try over and over again until you're happy with it. Nothing happens until you rasterize or apply the mask. Okay, so the last thing I'm going to do is just add some text real quick. I have Ultra 7 graphic design, so the type tool, I'll just quickly show you that. I'm going to go back to white as a foreground color. I'll use my type tool, and I just click anywhere on your stack of layers. So I'm going to go above the color layer. So I'm going to choose my color layer and then add my text to that. It'll be above that layer. And I'm going to type in Ultra 7 graphic design. And it'll be multiple lines. So it's coming in as at the last color I used for text. So if I double click on the T on the layer, it'll select the text, and then if I change the color, I'm just going to go with white. It will be, I'm using only web colors, and then the top left corner is always white. 100% white, FFFFF. And then I'm going to go with Century Gothic, which is that kind of nice round font. You can use whatever you like, of course. That's not Century, yep, Century Gothic. And I'm just going to quickly change the kerning for my ULT. There's a little bit too much space there. I'll change it on the A and the P as well, so that's the space between letters. The H and the I. So basically anywhere there's kind of vertical lines, I'm going to squish it together because we can get really close on those, and it makes it look a little more logo-ish. So I'm just going to select those 3, and we get it kerning with this little option here. Kerning is the space. They call it tracking for the selected characters, which is similar to kerning. It's probably a difference, but I don't know what it is. So that looks pretty good. Actually, I should have used the U and L as well. I think they need to squish together as well. Nice. So you can get it make it look a little bit more designy. So we get a little bit of room here too. We can change the space there. I can go down quite a bit, I think, on that one. So basically, just to taste, you can quickly modify this stuff. And I'm going to do the same thing here. Nice, and the same thing there. Oops, that's not what I wanted. This one here. Nice. And the same thing there. I'm not sure if F4 would work in that situation, which is redo. You try it out. So that looks pretty good. I've squished things together. I think we could probably go with the R and the A as well. Hasn't reduced the readability of it. It's just that there's a system spacing that's required for all text. There's a little bit of kerning built in, but you can always, I think we can notice how the E is curved here as well as there's an S there, so you can squeeze those together a bit more as well. Something I do quite a bit of, so my text doesn't look so system. And then I also want to change the spacing between the lines. So if I select all 3 lines, I can use this one here. There we go. So I've got some text in there. Looks pretty good. I'm just going to increase the text a bit here on that one. I think we actually have to select the entire paragraph. That's why I was having issues there, which isn't required with tools like Microsoft Word. So again, my goal is to make it look a little less system. I'm going to go with make those a little smaller as well. And you can change the alignment if you like. I'll go to right aligned. And I'll put it, yeah, I think that looks good. That kind of goes around the curvature of the eyeball. A little different than I have in my example, but I just mess around with it every time. This is a little bit heavy as well. I think it's bold, so I can make it not bold, regular. Or maybe the Ultra 7 can be bold and then the rest can be regular, stuff like that. Whatever you like. And you can also, one thing I like to do is change the opacity of the image. So we have opacity here, so, sorry, the layer I should say, to make it not so brash. And something I frequently do also is add a drop shadow to make the text stand out from the background a little better. a glow or a drop shadow will do that. And I can get a preview there. It looks pretty good stock. I'm just going to choose OK for that. And one thing I like to do is change the angle of that and maybe a little bit of distance. Perfect. I'm going to quickly save this as a JPEG, so I'm not sure how much longer this will be available in Photoshop, but if you go File, Export, we have Save for Web Legacy. Something I've used a lot in the past, so I still use it. There might be a better tool, but we get a preview of our compression options. So I'm going to go with JPEG 100%. Whichever example you have selected, if you're using the 4-up is the one that'll be exported. So I'm happy with that one. I'm just going to go ahead and save. And now it's in a format that you can share. PSDs you cannot share so easily. I'll put it on my desktop. It requires that the user have software that understands Photoshop document files, but if you save as a JPEG, then anybody with a browser will be able to view it. Anybody with a phone, really. So again, that's using layer masks along with the gradient tool for transparent changes from opaque to transparent, softening the edges of things effectively, adding text. We looked at the effects, drop shadow, and texture on a shape, as well as the blending modes for that color layer. So quite a few things. Thanks so much for watching.